Hey there, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the vlog. Welcome to day 5, I think it is, of VEDS. Is this day 5? 5, yes. I'm not actually quite sure. You know, we're only 5 days in and I've already lost track. But today I'm going to do something I don't usually do on this channel. I'm going to talk about sport. The Vancouver Canucks just last night were eliminated by the Vegas Golden Knights out of playoff contention. But it was a wild ride. It was a fun ride. And I really enjoyed cheering on the team in the playoffs for the first time in 5 years. And it provided a nice distraction from, 2020. I've been a hockey fan ever since I can remember because, well, my dad is a prominent hockey coach in Vancouver. So, by definition, since I was a kid, I've been kind of into hockey because whenever there was, particularly a Canucks game, the TV would be on in the house, and me as a little kid would be drawn to it. And even my dad, when I was 2 years old, took me to the 1998 NHL All-Star Game in Vancouver, in which that game saw an awesome reunion of 80s Oilers stars, Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier, and I was too young to even have any clue what was going on. Obviously, I have no memories of that night, but apparently, I've been told that I was there. And the first time, the earliest Canuck memories I really have in terms of a memorable Canucks playoff run would be back in 2003 when I was just 7 years old, and the Canucks beat the St. Louis Blues in 7 games. I remember being so fixated on that series, and every day I would go to school and think about how the Canucks were doing that series and could they win tonight? Oh, if they win tonight, they'd be 1 game away from winning the series. And then we got to that point, we were like, oh, we could just beat the St. Louis Blues. The Canucks won that series in 7, and little 7-year-old me was so stoked. And then the following series, they went up against the Minnesota Wild, and the story at that time was that the Canucks can beat the Minnesota Wild. This team is awesome. This was the team back in the day with the West Coast Express line, and I loved the team so much. They were fun and they were competitive. And then in the second round, they went up against the Minnesota Wild, and we went up 3-1. And I remember counting the games until we were going to make the conference final. So we were 1 game away from the conference final, and then the Canucks proceeded to lose 3 games in a row, and the Minnesota Wild were the team that got to go on to the conference final. I remember being just devastated. I probably cried. I also probably cried the next year when the Canucks were ousted in 7 games by the Calgary Flames, and I probably cried again in 2007, and then again in 2011. 2011 was particularly horrible. That was the year the Canucks made the Cup final and were expected to win, and lost in a hard-fought 7-game series. And then to add insult to injury, the city of Vancouver thought it would be just a swell, fun idea to basically attempt to burn its own city to the ground in a horrible riot that made the people of Vancouver look like absolute jerks. And we kind of felt that way too. A lot of bad memories surrounding 2011, even though it was fun to watch the Canucks in that very long playoff run, which almost saw them win the Stanley Cup. As much as that part of it was fun, it did not leave a good taste in the mouths of the people of Vancouver, particularly how the team just couldn't make it all the way, but way, way more than that, the way that people thought it would be a good idea to riot. And then the next year, the Canucks did very well in the regular season and then did very poorly in the playoffs. Canucks have never won the Stanley Cup, and us Canuck fans are used to it, believe me. But the Canucks hadn't made the playoffs in this last 5 years since 2015, so to be honest, I hadn't paid much attention to them in the last few years. I am totally a fair-weather Canucks fan. I'm not afraid to admit that. Hockey is not my first love. But then, this year, of course, we all know what happened in March. All of the major sports were canceled, and hockey was no exception. And now, obviously, they were doing the right thing. And I hadn't really been following the Canucks this season. But 4 months went by with no hockey, and then the NHL slowly was in talks with resuming the season. And I was one of those people even back in a month and a half ago, back in July, when the NHL was just beginning the restart. I was like, this is a bad idea for the NHL to go back and do playoffs again. It's not a good idea. And then I said, it's just going to cause more cases. And more than that, the regular season ended 4 months ago. So, this isn't even going to have any relation to the regular season. You're just going to jump right into the playoffs 4 months after you've had any games. The stuff that happened in the regular season doesn't even matter anymore, And then the NHL proved me wrong on both counts. They created a system of bubbles in Edmonton and Toronto that the players have to self-quarantine once they arrive, and then they're not allowed to leave the bubble. And it's created a situation where there's been exactly 0 cases in the NHL so far, 0 COVID-19 cases, and they've done these playoffs in such a really fun way to include 24 teams instead of the regular 16 that make the playoffs, and have a play-in round to see who actually makes the real playoffs. It's just made for a really fun and competitive playoff atmosphere that just proved me wrong on all accounts, and I was so happy after the quarantine of 4 or 5 months that was still ongoing, after all of the uncertainty, that at least I had one thing about my childhood that was back up and running. And also, these were competitive hockey games that allowed me to worry about the problems of Vancouver Canucks rather than the problems of the world. The Canucks played in the play-in series this year against the Minnesota Wild. Nobody was really sure if the Canucks would win. I was used to the Canucks not doing well in the playoffs the last several years, if and when they made the playoffs at all. And that was a best-of-5 series. The Canucks lost Game 1 3-0, and I was one of those jerks running around being all like, here we go again. We have the playoffs, hockey's back, and some things, even though 2020's been so crazy, some things never change, just like how the Canucks are just going to get swept in the first round here. Canucks fought back and won the next 3 straight games to win the best-of-5 series, 3-1. I was delivering pizza at my day job, and I was listening to the game on the radio, and it was in overtime, and I knew that if the Canucks scored, they could get on to the next round. And I had to leave the car to deliver some pizza to somebody's door. I left the car, started walking up to the house, and I heard just the whole block erupt. And I knew the Canucks must have just scored. They must have just won. And that was the feeling I hadn't felt since 2011, almost 10 years ago, when this whole city was so invested in the Vancouver Canucks in the playoffs that you could just hear the city applaud whenever the Canucks would score a goal. Finally felt that again against the Minnesota Wild, and I was hooked into being a full-blown Canucks fan. Seriously, ask anyone who's been at my work the last couple weeks. All I can talk about is Canucks. Canucks made the first round of the real playoffs against the St. Louis Blues. And the St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup last year, for those of you who don't know, so the Canucks were not expected to beat them, and we were all just saying, please, please, just let them be competitive in this series. And oh boy, they were. It was a long road full of uncertainty and days when you felt the Canucks were surely out, but the Canucks beat the St. Louis Blues. And it blew my mind. And now the Canucks were on to the second round. Technically the third round of these playoffs, if you include the play-in round that allows you to make the real playoffs. But the second round of the real playoffs, it's all very confusing, against the Vegas Golden Knights. I love to hate the Vegas Golden Knights. They're a brand new expansion NHL team from 2017. And I hate them because they've had so much success so immediately. That in the 3 years they've been an NHL team, they made the Stanley Cup final in 2018, and now are looking like they might do the same thing 2 years later. Meanwhile, the Vancouver Canucks have been around for 50 years. Our fan base has nothing. We've made the Stanley Cup final 3 times, but that's it in 50 years. And now the Vegas Golden Knights look like they might win the Stanley Cup in their 3rd year. Man, that's not fair. And also the players are really arrogant, and it's just, and they love to chirp, and they love to be fairly dirty on the ice. And it's just, yeah, they're a team I love to hate. And now the Canucks were going up against them, and they were clearly going to lose. Clearly the worst team. And I was like, no, the Canucks will probably get swept in 4 games in this series. It'll probably be over really fast, but I just hope we're at least a little bit competitive. Canucks play game 1, and Vegas beats us 5-0, and that was a terrible hockey. Not for Vegas. Vegas was firing on all cylinders, but teams were so widely like mismatched. Like the Vegas Golden Knights were just in a different league from Vancouver. We couldn't get anything done. We could never leave our zone, and it was 5-0. And our goalie Markstrom played fairly well, and we still couldn't keep it from being 5-0. They were that bad. And then it was like, oh, they're gonna get swept so easily, and it's gonna be really embarrassing. And the Vegas players after Game 1 were so smug about it too. Like, these guys are so cute. They think they can play. Oh, and it was really awful. Then came Game 2, and I was again delivering pizza, and I turned on the radio all sheepishly, and I was like, oh, do I even want to listen? The Canucks are just gonna get slammed again. And in Game 2, the Canucks came out flying. Jacob Markstrom, our goaltender, was amazing all through these playoffs. And in Game 2, he kept the door shut, and the Canucks beat Vegas. I believe it was 5-1, and it was, or 5-2, excuse me. And it was such an in-your-face, like, they beat us so bad in Game 1, and they made fun of us so much, and we came back and showed them in Game 2. And that tied the series at 1, and then I started to get those thoughts I was telling you guys about from when I was 7 years old, and I was counting down the games until the Canucks could make the conference final. They were doing it again. I was counting down. The Canucks have 3 more wins, and then they could make the conference final. And then Vegas beat us again in Game 3 to take a 2-1 lead, in which they shut us out again like they had in Game 1. And in Game 4, the Canucks played really well, and after 2 periods we were up 3-2, and I was like 20 minutes away from the Canucks being able to tie this series at 2. And then the Canucks had a really terrible 3rd period, and they lost 5-2. And I was listening to the radio post-game show, and a couple people called in to say that, well, the Vancouver Canucks just don't have the heart to win this series. That made me so mad, and I was thinking about how the Canucks were not expected to make it anywhere near this far in the playoffs. We're having so much fun listening to this team. We're sort of reliving our past when the Canucks did okay in the playoffs, and we have a distraction from this horrible virus. And these people are still whining and complaining on the radio. So I don't know why, sort of passion overcame me, and I called the post-game show. I actually got through to the post-game show, and just to try to share some positivity about how awesome it is to be seeing this team actually be competitive.
Let's go back to the phone boards, 604-280-0650. Graham in Maple Ridge is on the line. Graham, thanks for calling in, man.
Yeah, first game of this series, I was saying to all my friends that, I just hope they can be competitive in this series. We've seen that so much.
And even though it was clear that we were going to lose the series in the next game, it was fun to see the Canucks get this far. And then after that game, we learned that our goaltender, Jacob Markstrom, was injured and too injured to play in the next game. And I was like, this team, we don't have a good backup. And we made it this far, but we're just going to lose. Game 5, we're down 3-1 in this series. Vegas has 3 chances to move on. We're not going to make it. And we have Thatcher Demko in net, who's this nobody goalie who, hasn't proved himself. And in Game 5, Thatcher Demko came out and played what we all thought would be the best game of his career. He stopped all but one of Vegas's 43 shots. Canucks could only make 17 shots on net, and the Canucks still won because Thatcher Demko wouldn't have allowed it to go any other way. Just kept everything out of the net. It was a brick wall. And he sort of lifted the Canucks up on his shoulders and said, hey, come with me. We're going to Game 6. And that's exactly what they did. They made it to Game 6. And I was like, the Canucks can't do this again. It was such a cool thing they did. Now we're 2 games away. Again, and being my kid self, being like, oh my gosh, now there's 2 games away. But at the same time, this goalie had just a miraculous performance. He's not going to do it again. Oh boy, he did it again, and then again some more in Game 6. He stopped 48 saves for a shutout. If you're not a hockey fan, which I assume you are, having tolerated this entire video, when you're outshot 48-23, as the Canucks were in Game 6, you're not going to win the hockey game. Canucks won 4-0 on a couple of great goals, and the insane play of 24-year-old goalie Thatcher Demko, who in those 2 games he played in the series, he had a save percentage of .989. That means he stopped 90, I believe, of 91 shots. It's ridiculous. Nobody's supposed to play that good. It's ridiculous. The Canucks should have been out of this series long ago, but this one 24-year-old goalie, who's a week older than I am, by the way, to the day, is stealing the show and saying, like, he physically just would not allow the Canucks to lose. And then last night, the Canucks wound up in Game 7 against Vegas in a situation where if we won, we could make the conference final. Now, just like when I was 7 years old and the Canucks lost in Game 7 to the Minnesota Wild, the Canucks, despite a third consecutive incredible performance from backup goalie Thatcher Demko, the Canucks just didn't have it, and they lost 3-0 against the Vegas Golden Knights. 2020 has been a pretty nutty year for us all. I don't think any of us are in the same place in terms of our life goals or just in terms of how we're mentally feeling about everything than we were when this year started. But hey, at least some things never change. Just like when I was 7 years old in 2003, I got to hear my Vancouver Canucks having a really fun and awesome playoff run, only to have them lose in Game 7 of Round 2. Just like they did when I was 7. Like I said, some things never change, but I really enjoyed what these players have done just to distract me from everything that's going on for about a month and a bit, just for making things interesting, just for living in this bubble where they had to be away from their families for over a month. Like I said, the NHL did not mess around with this bubble. They said that everyone in the bubble must quarantine and must not leave, so these players played without being able to be around their families or anyone else except for their fellow players and some officials and whoever was allowed in the bubble. The Canucks survived in this bubble for just over a month, have just been eliminated. There are now 4 teams left in the fight for Stanley Cup, and you better believe that in the next few weeks, even though the Canucks are out, I'm going to be listening to them as well. Thank you for tolerating this very long and rambly video, but big thanks to the Vancouver Canucks for being really fun to watch and listen to for me this year. And hey, maybe I'll actually be invested enough to follow next season as well. I'm really excited for what the future holds for this team. Thanks for giving me a little bit of a distraction from 2020.